most of you probably haven't been over that way, or if you have, it's probably very rare. So I'm not so much a beach goer, as much anymore, definitely to avoid like suit, hair. So Lloyd, no relation to Lloyd's Market, the one right here. But so yeah, I was asked tonight to come and just kind of tee up the purpose and the origins of the work group, the land use reform work group. And just out of curiosity, I wonder how many have actually either tuned in or got to listen to any of the recordings from the work group. And no worries if you haven't, but okay, yeah, just curious. Because some of it in the work group can get a little technical and kind of high level, even for myself as I'm new to this. I've been studying land use for a couple of years, but even then it's still, some of the stuff kind of can go over your head. So I'm always curious as to how the public is grasping some of the concepts that are talked about in the work group. But in just a little context, so this past election, there was 3 new council members that swore in on the Sussex County Council. So much like a town council, the county has a council, there's 5 members. So that would be a majority of the council had a turnover this year. That's a 4-year term, okay? And we look at sort of the golden thread that the 3 new members ran on. It really swirled around the all things land use, since county council is a land use legislative body, okay? And this feeling that not just the folks here on the beach side feel, but the folks on the west side feel. And that is the issue of overdevelopment, lack of infrastructure, keeping up with the demanding growth, the middle and low income, we'll say service workers, with a lack of inventory or supply of housing for them. That's really what's a big contributor, turns out, to what's driving the cost of housing up in this area. And so the origin of the work group really is actually you guys. And that might sound strange, but it's the citizen groups, it's the people, it's the residents, it's the voters that install us in office. And we are merely the vessels by which your voices flow. And so in recognizing that, we kicked off the year, and it was the consensus of the council to go ahead and create the land use reform work group. This is actually a monumental lift. What we're trying to achieve in the work group is pretty monumental. Like I said, it gets very technical. It's a very judicious process, what they're tasked to come up with. And that leads me to just a big thanks to them. We have 10 members on the work group, I'm sure you all are aware. But it's a service that they've been to do, committed time. These are all professionals, experts in their own fields. And so big shout out to Jill Hicks, Mike Ryman, Christoph Toulouse at Center for Inland Bays. And so we have one more meeting as of right now, September 11th, that work group, for them to pitch recommendations to the county council that will ultimately bite off on or make amendments there too. And we're all looking forward to that as the council. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Ann.
Thank you so much, Matt. Yes. Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you. Do we have any other elected officials in the room to recognize? No. All right. Thanks for coming, Matt. All right, well, let's get started. What I'd like to do is allow the panelists to briefly just sort of introduce themselves, what organizations they represent, and maybe some of their top issues for wanting to get involved in the panel. Jill, why don't I start with you?
Okay. Good evening, and thanks for being here, and thanks for offering us this opportunity to share. My name is Jill Hicks, and I'm co-founder and president of the Sussex Preservation Coalition. We are a nonprofit organization. We have over 4,000 members and over 30 allied organizations. We are interested in seeing land use provide a balance between our environment and also the infrastructure and quality of life here in Sussex County. We came about when I was fighting to try to save a large forest behind my home that was full of wetlands. We did not succeed, But in that process, we learned that the real issue was the land use codes that don't protect our forests and our wetlands, and stop some of the overdevelopment that's happened out in areas where we otherwise would not like to see it.
Christoph?
Good evening, everyone, and just want to acknowledge that we're here right in the middle of your supper times. So an extra thank you to all of you who have come out, and it's great to see such a good turnout. Obviously, a reflection of how important this issue is to all of us. I'm Christoph Touloux. I'm the executive director of the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. We've been in existence for just over 30 years now, and we are a creation of the Delaware General Assembly back in 1994. In recognition of a partnership that the estuary had already established with the United States Congress and the US EPA, which in Congress back in 1987 actually designated Delaware's inland bays as one of 28 estuaries of national significance around the country. And if you think about it a minute, that includes San Francisco Bay, that includes Puget Sound, that includes Long Island Sound, that includes Mobile Bay, Tampa Bay. So we're in pretty esteemed company. And I might add our own Delaware Bay. And so a recognition that these estuaries, which are magical places and also a huge resource to our natural life as well as our economies, and that they deserve protection, that they need protection. And development on the land side has a huge implication for what happens with those bays. And so we were sweating it along with a lot of other folks that Matt has described, because as that development occurs, there are changes in the way the water flows off the land, the way pollution gets into our water, and it's none of it good. So anyway, we're motivated to be a part of this process and to be a technical resource as well as just a cheerleader to get the council the kinds of recommendations, one, that make sense, and B, are politically palatable. Because the recommendations are one thing, action by the council is another thing. So my suggestion is stay tuned, see what those recommendations are, and then let the council know that you feel strongly one way or another about those, because they're going to be looking for your feedback as well. So anyway, that's the motivation and why I'm here.
Yeah, Mike.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Ryman. I am a civil engineer with a company called Becker Morgan Group. I've been an engineer for about 24 years. Graduated University of Delaware, and actually our company designed this very building that you're in. Hopefully you like it. If you don't like it, we didn't design it. Blame somebody else. No, I became an engineer because I love building things. I love seeing communities grow. I like being part of that process. You feel a connection with the community when you're part of that process. And I've just always enjoyed it. And that's why I became an engineer, and that's why I love the profession. Over my career, I have a fallacy that I have a hard time saying no. So when somebody says, will you be on this board? Will you come to this meeting? Will you show up at this event? I say yes. And I said yes to Ann about being here tonight. I said yes to being on the working group, and I'm glad I did. I got to meet Jill, and I got to meet Christoph, and it's been and other folks on the board. It's been a really great experience, and I think you tend to get a lot of respect for the various viewpoints that are part of that group, right? And that's, I think, was the goal of the group, was to find the various competing interests and viewpoints that are there and find a way to solve this problem that we have. And I've really enjoyed the process, and I found it extremely rewarding. Because I can't say no, I also said yes to be on the American Council of Engineering Companies board, and I'm a past president of that association, which represents engineers throughout Delaware, or engineering companies throughout Delaware. And that has allowed me to participate throughout the state in all 3 counties on different boards, groups, reform groups, DelDOT working groups, etc. And I've spent a lot of time on that process. And I most recently became president of the Home Builders Association as well. Same kind of thing. I spent many hours I want to say before 2019. It was probably 2017 to 2019 working on stormwater reform when DENREC was going through and doing a major overhaul of all the stormwater regulations. I remember spending hours and hours on that as well. And I just have always enjoyed that process. And I feel like I have a mentality of we can fix it, right? We can fix it. If something's broken, we can figure out how to fix it. And what I've enjoyed the most about all of these processes is finding a way to take two different ideas or two completely different sides of an issue and trying to find a way to come to the compromise that works for both groups. And we certainly have that in this discussion around land use. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But there's a number of competing interests involved when it comes to land use. And, you know, there's not one that's more important necessarily than the other. And we got to find a way. How do we find that balance? How do we strike that balance? I love that challenge. It is certainly a challenge. And if you've tuned in, those of you that have tuned into the conversations of the working group, you certainly hear the passion and energy around the different issues involved on this very sensitive and sometimes emotional topic. I think you have to approach it with a level of respect for everybody that's involved in the process. And I think you got to be willing to compromise. I think everybody has to be willing to compromise. And that's how we get things done. And I think the group has done a really good job of that. And it's because we've communicated. And I think most of us have, if not all of us, have entered that process with a level of respect for everybody that's involved. So just happy to be here. Look forward to talking more with you and answering questions.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, folks. Councilman, I have been to the Gumboro Fire Hall. I've really driven, was back then, every on Chip Road in what was Charlie West District.
Charlie West.
Charlie West. So that is because I once led DelDOT back many decades ago. And so I have some familiarity with that. But anyway, I want to commend you and your fellow council members for putting this working group together. It's a great way to start a conversation that's long overdue. So DelDOT, one part of what I've done here in Delaware, and I'm now part of a coalition, multi-sector coalition, which we've dubbed Rethinking Delaware. And we've come together because we really want to help people get to a new place about how we think about land use and transportation, because it is interconnected with our housing problem, which you just mentioned, our health outcomes. We have high rates of various illnesses, partly because we've designed physical activity out of our lives. We have climate challenges. We have some transportation challenges. Most people don't recognize that for many households, transportation is the second highest household cost behind housing. And for people who have fairly low incomes, having that burden is a really hard hill to get over, because you have that housing challenge, but there's food, clothing, medical, et cetera. So we have sort of assumed that driving is the way we get around, but it's a very expensive, not only for personal people, but also for public. So our objective is to focus on how can we update state policies, because we want to incentivize compact, mixed use, walkable, transit supportive neighborhoods and communities where we get to connect with each other than in a parking lot. And on the other hand, make it more difficult to build in the area that we need to protect and preserve for a whole bunch of reasons, whether it's the agricultural industry, which is very important in this part of the state, or the climate resilience that we need to protect from, or habitat and water quality and all the other range of environmental issues as well. So it's sort of like a barbell. Easy to do the right thing in the right place, much more difficult to do it where we shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So that's what we're up to. We're going to be putting together some recommendations, and we'll be working hopefully with the governor and other folks like Mike, and we have several members. Jill and Christoph and Joe Pica are members of Rethinking Delaware, and we have a whole bunch of other organizations, housing, health, et cetera, 4 former cabinet secretaries. So hopefully we'll be able to get some traction. And we are not an organization, we're a loose coalition, so we have limited capacity. But anyway, we have a large mission and we need a lot of help. So we hope to have lots of conversations up and down the state, get people thinking about what we're doing to ourselves.
And for those of us who don't know your name, I think you give us your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann Canby.
And not on the working group.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, everyone. And Sierra Club is also a member of the coalition too.
I'm sorry,
No
excuse
worries.
me, yes, right.
Yes, it's a very wide-ranging coalition. It's wonderful. So let's start off this conversation about the working group. I have a question for Jill. From your perspective, why was establishing this working group important, and what pressing issues do you think? Oh yeah, let me do that again. From your perspective, why was establishing this work group important, and what pressing issues do you believe brought this together?
I think Matt put it very well. The biggest pressing issue that I see is the amount of overdevelopment with infrastructure that's not been able to keep up, along with the amount of forest that we're seeing and we're losing at a rapid rate, which actually is part of the infrastructure. If you don't have forests and you don't have clean water, nothing else really matters. So what was the question again?
Yeah, what pressing issues brought it together?
Yes,
Yeah.
so that is something that we've been working on for the 3 years that we've been as a coalition, is how do we improve land use codes and ordinances so that we can get these things under control. It has been extremely educational for me to work with this group of people. I have learned a lot. I have really appreciated getting to know them. And also working with Ann Canby and having discussions with her about different ways to manage this problem and manage some of these solutions. So I think it was important to get all the stakeholders together so that we, rather than just looking at it from one side, one dimension, we get a full perspective of the impact and negotiating how we can get through this in the best way.
Do any of you other panelists have other issues that haven't been raised as of yet? Or do you think it's covered pretty well? Yeah. Perfect. All right. Question for Mike then. You mentioned, let me ask the question, I'll hand it to you. You mentioned the collaboration, different interest groups coming together. What have been some of the give and take that's had to happen to get to a place of commonality across these issues?
I think there's been, excuse me, I think there's been a lot of give and take, actually. And I think that's been the tone from the beginning. And it's hard to really pinpoint all of the details. I think every recommendation put together, all of the recommendations taken as a whole are collectively a series of give and take. The reality is that, you know, we need housing. Some may not like that or agree with that, but we do need housing. We also do need to protect forests. We also do need to do a better job of coordinating with infrastructure. We need to make sure we have schools. We need to make sure we have roads. We need to make sure the sewer works. We need these things. We need to protect our resources, but we also need housing. And so you have to look at it from that sort of overarching perspective. We can't say we're going to stop one thing and move forward with the other. You have to look at it all together. And I think that's been the theme through this discussion. Some of the give and take things around density. One of the things that was, I would say, a common agreement, and others can chime in on it, is that some of the low density sprawl that is happening throughout the county in large part is due to some of the low density requirements that we have, right? So that's why you're seeing large single family houses basically throughout the majority of the county. That actually hurts the protection of forests, the protection of natural resources, uses up more land, hurts farms, et cetera, et cetera. So how can we do it better? It also exacerbates traffic issues because more driving, car-centric transportation. So how do we address that? You can address that by obviously just increasing density. You can't do that by itself. We have to have, along with increasing density, we have to be decreasing density in some areas so that we can target where we want the growth. We want to make sure that growth targets to where infrastructure and those things exist so that we can have walkable and pedestrian-centric types of growth. And so I think density is probably the #1 thing where there's give and take on that. Developing things like growth areas and areas that shouldn't be growth areas. That is something that Sussex has struggled with for many, many years, is where to focus growth. And I think the group has done a really nice job of coming up with recommendations that start to direct growth in the right places around infrastructure items. The other give and take is the resource protections, right? So one of the benefits of some of the density changes is that it allows an opportunity now to do a better job of protecting resources because you're using less land or you need less land to accomplish some of the housing needs that we do have and need, not just throughout Sussex County, but throughout the entire country. We're about 3.7 million housing units short throughout the country. Affordable housing is a major problem. It is an even worse problem in eastern Sussex County, where it's extremely expensive to build or buy a home. So how can we look at ways to protect these resources, put requirements in place that accomplish that, but at the same time still allow for an opportunity to deliver housing in a much needed market? So I would say those are the couple of items that jumped out at me. And there's others, that's not all of them, but there's a number of recommendations. But the theme, I think, in the entire process has been looking for ways to balance all of the competing priorities.
Terrific. That's good to hear. Christoph, do you think the group progressed on these fronts we've talked about, and how far?
Yes, I do. I think we've made great progress. And I think Mike has talked some particularity about some of the trade-offs and all the rest. I think one of the things that's important in thinking about this and where I think we are also in agreement is that the package needs to be viewed as a package. There's going to be a temptation to say, oh, look, you got 19 recommendations or whatever the number ultimately be. I like that one, and I like that one, and I like the one over here. I don't like this one over here, and I don't like this one over here. But that's the nature of the compromise that we've reached. We have reached across recommendations to be able to accommodate one another in our fundamental interests, but it means that the package has to hold together. So getting to the point of density, first of all, it's not a very popular concept, never has been here in Sussex County. But if you have a place where it makes sense to have construction take place, to have development occur, because the infrastructure is there, then make it worthwhile, provide the incentive to have that construction, those developments take place in those places. So make it easier because you're creating more density, making it possible for that development to take place in a way that is also respectful then of our natural resources and the need to protect them. That is respectful of an understanding that there are places where it doesn't make sense to have that development take place. So the basic dichotomy is areas of growth, areas of non-growth, and create the incentives to get the growth where you want it, create the disincentives to have development occur in those places where you wouldn't want it to occur. And so that's the big part of the package. And so your temptation, as all of ours would be, is to look at these recommendations and say, I only like 3 of them, or I only like 4 of them. I think the thing is, and the thing that we need to keep in mind, is we like the whole thing because it represents the big compromise, and it is an amalgamation of a lot of work, a lot of thought, a lot of compromise. So anyway, that's my suggestion as you're thinking about this and looking at those recommendations. They don't really stand alone, and they're not there as a menu. We're offering them up as a package.
Interesting, right? And Anne, how do you think these efforts can inform what Rethinking Delaware is hoping to accomplish in the state?
Well, I am truly the outlier because I've been sitting through all these meetings with all the detail and nitty gritty down at the bottom of the basin, so to speak. But I tend to think of things from a further up perspective and start out trying to figure out what's the vision of what we want, whatever the place is, to be like. And the counties are now required to do a comprehensive plan. And there is one for Sussex. And if you read it, it's not bad. There are lots of visions, and a number of them, I think, match very well with what Rethinking Delaware would like to see as outcomes for the state, not just Sussex. I mean, I would say we have issues up and down the state in terms of how we develop. But one thing that struck me as I took a little look at it a day or so ago, they have a community design vision to encourage the development of neighborhoods of innovative and superior design to preserve and enhance the character and community. enhance the character and community of Sussex County. And one of the objectives is encourage the revitalization of traditional areas of the county to create walkable, sustainable communities. Amen. That's what Rethinking really would like to see much more of. And that's right in the comp plan. Now, I'm not aware of how well the county is actually working to implement the comp plan. It was adopted in 2019, I think, signed off by then Governor Carney. And that's supposed to be what guides the decisions that get made by every jurisdiction that has to put a comp plan together. So that's one issue that I think, I don't know what the working group thinks in terms of its vision, in terms of what it's trying to create out of all these 19 recommendations. Where do we want Sussex to go? So that's sort of a broader question. I think also, and this is hard, and Mike had talked about it, Christoph too. The issues that Rethinking has brought together are all interconnected to land use and transportation. And so first we have to help people understand how these things all work or don't, and then figure out how to bring the right people together. So if we want to create walkable communities, what does it take? Who do we have to bring together? Do we want to keep developing auto-centric transportation systems here? Or do we want walkable communities? If so, what do we have to do? If we want to protect the agriculture industry, which is something that is mentioned in the comp plan as well, what do we have to do to make sure we do that? I have a question that I don't have any answer to because it's not my field, but at what point do we lose the critical mass where the agricultural industry is no longer viable in Delaware? I don't know the answer to that, but I hope somebody is thinking about it because it is a strong piece of the state's economy. So that's another thing. And then I'll just say one more thing now. I always believe, and when I led DelDOT, we got all the bridge people together and said, what's the condition? We developed a plan and we set about to fix it, because if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And we have to, I think, come up with some very clear goals about what we want to do in the state, in the county, with our municipalities, all agreeing on the problems and then how we're going to solve them. So we have goals that we're trying to achieve, and then we've put together plans to make it happen. Not easy, because it requires change. And we all know how hard change is. We don't like it. But if we're going to accomplish what we want, we have a vision and then we set out to get there. And we're really good, and we've done tons of reports in Delaware, starting with Shaping Delaware's Future in 1995, Livable Delaware. There was an energy plan when Markell was governor. We talk about this stuff, and then we don't really do much. So I think it's that rubber has hit the road, because clearly housing, I think, is generally accepted as a major problem in this state. Not alone, every other state has the same problem. Who do we need to build housing for? Where do we need to put it? Are questions we need to ask ourselves. And diversifying the housing stock. We have plenty of single family housing. We probably could use some more, but we have very little of anything else. So if you're my age, you might not want to have to mow a lawn forever. So you might want to live in a simpler community. Where would I go? Or where are my kids going to live? These are questions that our demographics say we better start paying attention to, because demographics are definitely destiny. So those are just a few things that hopefully will stir your brains to ask some more questions.
Excellent points. Thank you so much. And we will now take about a 15-minute break. And if you have questions already written, you could drop them in the basket that is somewhere over there, right over there. Drop them in this handy basket, and we'll consolidate them and ask some questions after the break. So let's come back here at 6:50. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Great.
All
right.
What's
the name of your organization? Frontier Information Coalitions. I can give you a Give us just a little bit more information about some of the formalities of the working group's mission. And if you wouldn't mind, mention where we find the package of recommendations, the draft recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me, okay, that's for online, I think.
Yeah, that's for online.
Okay, we'll try this again.
There you go.
So I neglected to do my one role I was supposed to, which was to tell you what the working group was tasked to do. So with that, let me give you the 5 deliverables that we, the council, agreed upon and gave them as direction for the work group. So number 1 was to implement smarter, sustainable development. Number 2, ensure growth is supported by infrastructure. 3, address the affordable workforce housing needs. Preserve farmland and natural resources. Prevent low-density, uncoordinated sprawl. And those are meant to be a very high-level, almost vague directions so the work group could really get into the nitty-gritty and define what each of those categories mean. And then what was the other thing I was gonna?
I think you hit it.
Okay.
I think you
Well, we'll
hit
get to that next time.
it. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, yeah, okay, so if you go to sussexcountyde.gov, sussexcountyde.gov, just type in the search bar, Sussex County Land Use or Land Use Reform Work Group, and it'll populate every meeting date with the agenda, the presentation, the deliverables, if they had come up with any recommendations at that time. And like I said, we have 1 meeting left. If you go on the sussexcountyde.gov, you can find the broadcast link and actually watch those meetings, and you can find the recorded ones and you can watch them. They're all about 2 hours long. So with that, I'll hand it back to Ann.
Thank you. And the draft recommendations are very interesting. They're definitely worth looking at. I also want to mention that on Zoom, we have a newly elected representative, Alana Berry. So, the State House Representative, Alana Berry. So welcome. So let's get right into questions. The audience had a bunch of really great questions, which we have just enough that I think we're just trying to go through them, pretty quickly. And panelists, please feel free to just, raise your hand, take a shot at whatever questions of interest to you. You covered where we will find the document, so that's good. Let's go into this one. Do some of the recommendations of the working group address the need for affordable and workforce housing? And is NIMBY a concern?
Who wants that one?
Who wants to take that one? Take that workforce housing?
Sure. So yes, the recommendations do address that issue through a couple of different ways. Number one is in the code, there's actually not a lot of missing middle housing actually defined in Sussex County's code, which may be surprising to some. You know, you have some multifamily housing definitions, but when it comes to like triplexes and cottage courts and duplexes and those kinds of things, they're actually not defined well in the code. And where you can put them is also very, very limiting. And so, you know, I go back to one of the reasons in Sussex County that you see basically a lot of large lot single families across the county is that is predominantly what is in the code and allowed. So one of the recommendations talks about providing definitions in the code for missing middle housing. So just so you can actually provide a more affordable product. That's number one. Number two, there's a recommendation around density. Providing more affordable housing means that you need to have densities in order to do it. Multifamily density limits at 12 units per acre is actually really, really low nationally. My company does work in other states. We're working on a project in New Hanover County, North Carolina, and it's a beautiful project, multifamily townhomes. It's 20 units an acre. It's a wonderful project, and you know that is going to allow delivering a product to the marketplace that is currently not there. In addition to that, there's some modifications to the SCRP program. For those that might not be familiar, there is a program in the county called the Sussex County Rental Program, where it incentivizes the development or inclusion of affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing, I mean kind of the big A, you know, big H, where you have housing that hits certain AMI targets. There are some revisions to that, so hopefully we see more of it. There has not been a lot of that type of housing in Sussex County because the code limits really the ability to provide it. And then in addition to that, there are some incentives in the code or in the recommendations to provide affordable. If someone provides a certain percentage of affordable housing in their community, there's opportunities to get density bonuses and things like that. So there's a number of provisions that will address affordable housing, but I do want to say a lot of folks think that in order to address affordable housing, you must have some program, like it must be a subsidized or funded program that says that, you know, so much percentage of housing must hit these targets. And we have that, and that's covered and is definitely a tool in the toolbox that we need to have. But simply providing more product types and opportunities for better product types that are more affordable by itself will provide an option to the community that doesn't exist in certain parts of the county.
And if I could just real quickly, there are the incentives for additional density bonus for providing and assuring that there is affordable housing. I think one of the key things to note here is affordability is a sort of a variable thing, and it kind of depends on the people. When we're talking about this, and I think it is, and it gets to the NIMBY question, I think, is we're talking affordability for the firemen, for the nurses, for the teachers, for the workforce. You know, this isn't just for housing of homeless people and doing those things, which of course is critically important, but creating affordability for people who have to now drive an hour or more in order to be able to live somewhere that they could afford. And so that's one of the big goals here. And so the kinds of development that will take place are going to be respectful of that, and the fact that if there's more of the product at greater density, you're likely to be driving prices down to a range that is affordable. And there will be people in extreme circumstances where affordability may not be reached through the market, and there are also programs that will affect that. Now, we did have some discussions, and Mike might be able to fill in with the details better than I, but yeah, there's a respect in the code, in the recommendations we're making, that, for example, if you're living in a subdivision somewhere, that you're not then going to be facing the multi-story structure in your backyard. So some respect for that in terms of transition and all the rest of it. has been a part of the discussion, will be part of the recommendations.
I also just want to address the NIMBY question too. Unfortunately, and I'm so glad you explained it, because I was going to do that, is that people don't understand or that affordable means the nurses, the teachers, the fire, the police officers. But unfortunately, NIMBY has gotten a bad name because it's not always, it's NIMBYism, not in my backyard, sometimes is what gets people involved. In other words, I would not have gotten involved in land use codes and ordinances had this large forest not come to my backyard. And because of the involvement in trying to save that forest and save that wildlife, that's where I learned that the codes and ordinances were not adequate enough to provide the protections that they need that other states already have. So I encourage you to get involved, but get involved early on. This is, as I think Mike said earlier, or maybe Christoph said it, is that our council members want to hear from you. They want to know what is it that what your expectations are, what you're looking for to happen. And also through this involvement, you will learn a lot, as I have. So get involved.
Terrific, thank you. Here's another question.
Can I just add a couple of things? on that?
Absolutely,
Sorry.
go in. Don't let me cut you off.
Thank you, that's right. In thinking about the housing thing, I think it's really important to think about the jobs housing balance and accessibility, so that the people who work at BB live near BB or wherever it may be. And I think in terms of getting more density, being sensitive to context-sensitive design, so that you're really keeping the context of the area, but also look at opportunities for redevelopment and infill, because there are certainly areas, I'm sure, maybe more some in the Western, in Laurel and Seaford and other places like that, where there's opportunities to redevelop and to infill in already incorporated areas. So you create new places out of old places, and you create places for people. We're really designing places for people as opposed to our cars. We're really good at designing for our cars. I mean, look at all the places that have parking lots all over the place, and you know, you have a road, you have a huge parking lot, and then you have whatever the thing is, a store or whatever. So transit is completely useless in an environment like that. So think about how we design for more than one travel option and for people, not cars.
Can I add on to what? Thank you. One of the other things that I have learned in this process by listening to the other stakeholders is that one of the reasons we're in so much trouble in this county when it comes to infrastructure is that the county has built in places where infrastructure was never planned, and that's the state investment level 4 that we're all familiar with. One of the things that I think we're going to see come out of this process is better collaboration between the county and the state, that we all agree that we want to stay out of those areas and become less auto-centric. I happen to live in an area that's state investment level 4. I do a lot of driving because in order for me to get to the grocery store, to get anywhere, to get any service that I need, it requires me to drive a long distance, and I have to use that arterial roads that are now so congested. So every time we build out in these in an area where the state has no plans to build infrastructure, we're adding a lot of congestion onto these roads that were never planned for. And so it's really important that the state and the county collaborate and then hold to the plan. When you build 24% of your building out in an area where the state had no plans on building infrastructure, you've created this problem that and it's all auto-centric. That we're all living with now.
This next question is teed up pretty well. In the interest of walkable neighborhoods and pedestrian safety, are there plans for better bike paths and overpasses across roads such as Route 1? Is that a recommendation? Oops.
I can
You want to take that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get you.
One of the things that we have talked about, although honestly, we don't have a solution for yet, are these bimodal paths to nowhere, or these roadways to nowhere. So one of the things that what I just described has created is that we have these subdivisions where the developer was meant or made to put in these bike paths along the frontage of the road, turning lanes and intersections. But the bike paths only go as far as the development, and then there's big open space, and the poor cyclists. I mean, I see kids out on Beaver Dam Road riding in the lane because the bike path end, and now they're back on a 2-lane farm road until they get to the next development. So it is a real issue. Did we come up with a solution? I don't think
Well,
so.
I can sort of. Sort of. So I don't know that we got that specific, right, on that specific item. I think, one of the things that we did include as a recommendation, and I want to point out that these draft recommendations we have one more meeting, so they're not final. So I want to be just cautious. I do think this is probably what comes out after the last meeting. So just, want to make sure that that's clear. But one of the current draft recommendations that's in there talks about enhancing TIDs or expanding TIDs. Transportation improvement districts. TIDs are transportation improvement districts. We have probably 5 or 6 of them throughout the state. They started sort of in Newcastle County. They have a number of them. There's one in Sussex County, the Henlopen TID right now. And there's actually one in Milford. I just think they call it the Milford TID. And there's more to come. And the transportation improvement districts are where the counties and DelDOT coordinate the transportation improvements together and plan for the future growth. And there are fees that are paid by the development as that happens. It allows for more cohesive planning. One of the challenges that has existed, and as an engineer, I've seen this, throughout my career. I remember doing traffic studies. So you have to do detailed traffic studies. That's always been the process. I remember doing 5 or 6 traffic studies for 5 or 6 different projects on the same road of the same intersection by 5 or 6 different developers. And guess what those 5 or 6 developers all did? That one's you. I'm not doing that one. You do that one. That's your project. That's your fault. You pay for that one. So you get this in that process. And guess what happens? The improvements happen piecemeal. Robinsonville Road, right? Piecemeal improvements, not connected, not cohesive, because that process basically limits each developer to their sort of piece. And there's only so much that each development or DelDOT can require of each development. TIDs flip that on its head. TIDs say, no. If we need to widen a road from A to B and it's 10 miles long, that's what we're going to do. And everybody's going to pitch in to get it done. And it just allows for those improvements to be planned better. And will that solve? I think it provides them a better opportunity to solve the connectivity problem. So you don't have the bike path that only goes to there and stops. And then you got to get out on the road and pray and then jump back on the bike path. So I do think TIDs are a fundamentally better way to deal with traffic and cohesively plan those things. And that is a key recommendation in this current draft.
Growth area.
Ann can talk way more about it than I can.
No, TIDs came after I left DelDOT, so I don't have any ownership to that. But I will say, as I look, and I've only done this a little bit, at how DelDOT has defined it, it's almost 100% roads. There's very little of any other form of transportation that they address. You look at the list of all the TIDs, it's all intersection improvements after one after. So it's not really balancing out and spreading the trips across multiple modes. Somewhere in here, I was just looking for it, there is a thing about master planned communities, I think in your recommendations. And that may be a way to be more comprehensive in thinking about the totality of the transportation investment to make sure it's not just single mode, it's multiple ways for people to get around. But right now, I think, and when people talk about infrastructure, I think everybody just is talking about roads. Well, you can keep building more roads. It's like letting the belt out on a fat person. You're really not making a lot of progress. It fills up. And then you have a bigger problem. Is a perfect example. I mean, it just keep adding does not fix the problem because you're not changing the nature of it. The way we design the transportation network now, it is basically guaranteed to produce congestion. Because everything feeds into Route 9, Route 1, Route 54, Route 24, Route 60, or whatever. We don't connect. Talk about connectivity. I think that's even more of a buzzword than density. Connectivity. Oh no, I don't want my community to connect with anybody else. That would be terrible. But that's how we spread out how we move around. We spread out load. And so that's just one thing to think about. We'll be talking to DelDOT about it, the TID program, and urge it to, and in fact, the governor in his policy statement when he was running said the TIDs need to be refocused to focus more on transit and walking and biking. So I think we need to sort of flip the coin here a little bit. It's not just all about cars, but about the other ways we know how to get around.
The audience is reading y'all's mind because the next question is, has there been conversation or work dealing with connecting existing neighborhoods, especially to promote access for emergency services?
We really didn't get into that level of specificity, no. I mean, I think there are some requirements in the code currently about interconnectivity, although they're not probably as rigid as they could be, to be honest. So, who wants to comment on that?
That's honest.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to combine these two questions. Sprawl is not only an environmental problem, but also has been called a time bomb for the county property tax base. At first, new isolated subdivisions seem like a good idea for local governments, but in about 20 years, roads need to be replaced, sewer and water lines need to be maintained, and taxes might not cover these costs. The question is that we'll eventually hit an upper limit of how much population growth the county can handle with its finite resources, like fire, paramedics, natural resources. How do we deal with that and strike the balance? Tough one. Okay.
Where's Mike?
You let Andrew.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, and
You go ahead, Crystal.
okay, well, just quickly. What was the question?
It's not sustainable. That's my answer. What's happening now is not sustainable.
That's the essence of the question. What the costs that will come and population growth and finite resources and what are we doing?
Well, we've lived for a long time and you've all heard it. Oh, the state's paying for it. No problem.
Right.
State's paying for it. Well, that may no longer be feasible because there are a lot of other things that are going on right now. And so we have to look at what we're doing. What's the fiscal impact of what we're doing? We've been having some conversations with an outfit who looks at how development is paid for, and they have wonderful, I think they're called heat maps. I'm too old to really know what the technical term is, but they show centers where all the spikes go up, and they show all the rest of the outline where all the spikes go down. And what that's telling us is that the center pays for itself, but it's also paying for all the outside area because that is not being paid for by the costs, the revenues that it generates. So we need to have more of a conversation so that people can understand the fiscal impact, because while the developer pays a little bit of the cost of the transportation upfront, the state pays the rest of it, and then forever the state has the ownership of the maintenance and operation of whatever that facility is. And it's not just that, it's schools, school transportation, school construction. There's a whole long list, and we've been talking to the Office of State Planning to try and really zero in on what are all the costs that the state is paying for, so that we can help people truly understand what the cost of what we're doing to ourselves are. There's a wonderful organization called Strong Towns, and there's the fellow that runs that is named Charles Marone, and he says, this is a development Ponzi scheme, what we're doing to ourselves now. So it's time to really put this out on the radar and have people start thinking about what we're doing to ourselves.
All right, next question. All right, since density is desired and transportation is a major consideration, should density and low-cost housing all be placed along Route 1?
Oh, gosh. I think it's hard to answer that question exactly. So, density needs to be in place. I mean, let's talk about Route 1, right? So you drive down Route 1, what is one of the things you notice? There's literally no mixed use. There's no mixed use. It's all commercial. There's no opportunities for mixed use because we've had rules in the county for decades that limit height. You have 42 feet. 42 feet has been the height in Sussex County for my whole life. And can't really do mixed use projects in 42 feet.
Is that just 2 stories?
You can do 3 and maybe 4,
Oh.
maybe 4. But you have to sacrifice the height for the retail or commercial section in order to do that. 42, if you want to do it, it's very expensive, right? So when you build a building with commercial on the bottom and residential above and the height and all of the things and piping and vents and all the things that have to happen in that building is very expensive. You can only add 2 or 3 floors on top of it. It's really not worth doing. It's one of the reasons we don't see mixed use projects in the county. And mixed use is one of the best ways to do all the things that Ann's been talking about doing and saving the environmental things that both Jill and Christoph have been doing. And it's almost impossible here. There's some examples of it, but it's sort of a shame that you have this corridor where folks could actually live where they work, walk to where they work, not have to get out on the road. It's really a missed opportunity. So I do think opportunities for redevelopment of corridors to allow those mixed use opportunities long term is something that should be encouraged.
And just another point too is downtown redevelopment, and we've alluded to that a little bit. Building where we are, building within the communities as they exist, create additional density opportunity there because that is typically where the work is. The work typically isn't on Route 1, except when you get, into, Lewis, Rehoboth and that stretch. But increasing height limits, maybe to 60 feet might be a recommendation in our package somewhere, to allow then, for example, all along Route 1, the ability to have people living above those commercial operations.
Form-based codes.
That would be an example of an opportunity that right now is not available in the county, really to focus on our developed places, our communities, our towns, and create an opportunity then to create the density that would be helpful to allowing the walkability, that would be allowing then the transit options that don't currently exist and doing those sorts of things. The converse of that is not having that happen in those broad swaths of Sussex County where the infrastructure isn't there and isn't going to be there. And so anyway, that's obviously a major theme of what we've been working toward.
All right, great. Here's 2 questions. I'll kind of combine these. What immediate actions should be taken to address environmental degradation and traffic congestion in Sussex County? How about a moratorium on new development until ordinances are passed based on the panel recommendations?
Look, I think a moratorium isn't helpful at all. In fact, it can have the opposite effect. I'm sorry. It'll have the opposite effect because what you will get is a mad rush of people filing plans to beat the moratorium. I've been through moratoriums in other counties. I work in all 3 counties. I'm familiar with all 3 counties. I've been through those conversations where major code changes or moratoriums are happening. And what happens is a flood of applications to beat the moratorium. And that's what'll happen. It'll happen. And guess what? It'll be projects that are based on the code that we all kind of said we don't really like, that we need to change and fix and do better. In addition, you're crushing the housing market that's already pretty bad and unaffordable, and it just makes it worse. So I think
Change the rules.
rather than a moratorium, what needs to happen is the recommendations that come out of this group should be tackled and should be tackled expeditiously and move forward. I think that's ultimately the right answer. We've identified the problem. We've given charted a course to fix it, and we should proceed down that path. The other thing I will tell you is, look, I'm a civil engineer. I'm not a builder. I'm not a developer. I work on all kinds of different types of projects. all over the state. And, the housing industry, though, is a major factor in our economy, a major, major factor. We did a study a couple years ago, like 22,000 jobs throughout Delaware depend on that industry. $1.6 billion of revenue to the state of Delaware, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenue to local jurisdictions in the state. It is not something we should just turn off. I think we need to fix the problem, no question, and we need to do it expeditiously. Period. But moratoriums tend to have the opposite effect.
So I'm not in 100% agreement in that. As far as the infrastructure versus the amount of development, and we are at a crisis point, and I think we're all feeling it, and we've all seen it. And so what concerns me, and I agree, we have to take this is a package. In other words, it works if we do this plan simultaneously. But the problem with it is that what this plan really gets to is the future comp plan. So yes, it has to be done expeditiously. We shouldn't wait another 2 or 3 years to get to what needs to be done and what we're recommending. But in the meantime, we're not in a good place. And so whether it's, I'm not saying have a complete moratorium. Do we need to stop development in that state investment level 4 out in those areas, which are really causing the major problem in congestion and some of the things that we're seeing now? Maybe it's not a moratorium, I don't know, maybe it's a pause, some way while this is all being done and worked on. It might be advisable to find a way to stop some of this development that's taking place in areas where we had maybe saying no business is a little too strong, but there was no plan for infrastructure. There is no plan for infrastructure. And so I'm not closing the door on a pause in those areas where we know we shouldn't be building.
Thank you. And we'll do this last question. Do you have a little follow-up real quick?
Yeah. Why don't you require the level 4 to provide their own utilities, their own infrastructure?
I can answer that. It's not just about utilities. When you build out, it's like I explained it before, when you build out in level 4, you are causing more traffic that's coming into those places.
But if they have no water and no sewer and no school,
They do
no
pay for their own.
direct access to public
They do.
resources for everything else, maybe it'll drive the cost and maybe they'll hesitate. Just during this period while you're trying to.
Do you want to answer that? Okay.
So they do. They already do. I'm not sure that many people understand that, but the developers pay for everything: sewer, water, roads. If they're in level 4, they are doing a traffic study, and a lot of times they do come with improvements. We talked about some of that earlier. One of the things that we did address as one of the recommendations, though, is in these outside growth areas, we did talk about a traffic impact fee to further disincentivize. So kind of to your point of where you were sort of going with that, the spirit of your comment, we did talk about having a traffic impact fee outside the growth zone to provide additional funding to deal with the roads that we talked about and the impacts that still happen on, I'll call it, inside the growth areas. So that is touched on in the current draft.
All right, thank you. That gets through our questions pretty well. Let's finish up with the panel talking about what kinds of things might you have wished you had gotten to, but you didn't, and what are next steps both for your organization and for this working group?
Yeah, I can take that. As I said before, one of the things that is really difficult to address is what do we do now? A lot of these items will take long-term planning, will take up to 2 years to even get them active, or I guess executed. An ordinance done. They'll take an ordinance or amendment to codes that we already have. So, what do we do in the meantime? And we didn't really come up with, and maybe it's because the goals that we're given really didn't drive us in that direction. But we have to come up with, what are we going to do in the next 2 years, next 3 years? What are we going to do to prevent this from becoming a bigger issue than it already is? And I share your concern with this rush to get permits in or applications in if there was a call for a large moratorium. So I think we have to be really careful when we talk about it, because that might also drive focus away from getting these ordinances done that we need to have done to deal with all these other lawsuits. So I think my disappointment is we don't have a quick fix. And I think we need to work expeditiously to get there. But I think in the meantime, what we didn't do was come up with a way to stop what's causing this crisis. And a lot of it has to do with what's going on out in that state investment level 4.
Just quickly, just keep in mind that, we're not rocket scientists. So what we're coming up with here is a set of recommendations. I think one of the things all of us collectively need to do is see how that's implemented, see how it affects the things that have created so much concern for all of us, and consider this process, as much as it looks like a third rail and it's the sort of thing you don't want to come back and address in a lifetime, that will likely have reason to come back and revisit at some point. And I think that for all of us, and I suspect for all of you as well, it's a learning exercise. Are these recommendations working? Is there something that could be done to make this, that, or the other component of these recommendations, once implemented, better? So I think the vigilance doesn't end with this, and I don't suspect there are many people in here who would think that we've got all the answers and we've got it perfect. And yeah, you can go on and think about other things in life other than how land use is affected here in the county. So that would be my suggestion, is as I wish we knew everything and I wish we had the perfect answers, but I think we've done as well as we could with the group that we're working with and with the time allotted. And so, but we just need to be vigilant. We need to keep an eye on how we're doing.
Yeah, I think, I feel pretty good about what we've done. I mean, we've had 10 meetings, they're 2 hours apiece. We've covered a lot of territory, a lot of conversations in that amount of time, in a very short period of time, because the council said, we need to go, and we need to go quickly, and you better get this done. So we had our charge from county council, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. The one thing I want to say, when we talk about the timing to implement these things, the reason that it's going to take some time to get through that process is because we're starting at the foundation of the problem, right? So we could have come up with recommendations that were Band-Aids, solutions, maybe ended up with a good headline, sounded good, like we're doing something, but it wouldn't have been gotten at the root of the problem. And the recommendations that we've come up with are at that root, and we're building that foundation that's going to allow us decades to continue to mold into the future. And, if you want to fix the foundation, it's going to take some effort, it's going to take some time, but it's the right thing to do. And it's going to take some courage, and it's going to take patience, but I think it's the right approach.
I have a huge question.
Okay, Ann's going to answer.
Is-
No.
This is a committee recommendation. Who is going to implement?
It's the county.
I think that citizens.
Here's my suggestion for that.
Go in.
There are a whole bunch of these recommendations.
Yes.
Find the low hanging fruit, do an ordinance, and do it right away to show that you're listening, and B, you're doing something about it. You're not going to answer the whole problem right away, but start the process. So I think that's, for the county, that's one thing to do. From a Rethinking Delaware's perspective, we're going to be coming up with recommendations that will both incentivize and disincentivize the kind of development that I spoke about earlier. We want to figure out ways to bring all levels of government together. So it's building a consensus of how to address the housing, the climate, the transportation, all the issues that we talked about, rather than, I think I said before, the process we have now is almost between the state and the local governments, a conflict resolution process. And that doesn't really get you to the right answers. We have to find a structure where people can come together and work on this. And first you have to agree on the problem, then you figure out the solutions, and then you do it. And so I think that's one thing. And what Rethinking is going to be doing also is reaching out and just talking about this, because we have to build more awareness to the issues that we're dealing with and give people an opportunity to think about and understand what we do about it and hear from people about what we ought to be doing. So, but I think it's really important with the work of this group, do something right away, just some low-hanging fruit, get the ball rolling.
Thank you all very much. I'm sorry that we haven't been able to get to all the questions. It is time for us to break. I'm going to hand the mic over to Dustin Thompson. He is the director of the Delaware Sierra Club with a little closing message. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everybody very much for coming out tonight. Thank you. Really appreciate everybody showing up on a windy and dreary day. I always like to end meetings with actions and give everybody something to do. So I'm going to do that. There on September 3rd, there is, so who has heard of Plus? Anybody in here has heard of Plus? Great, that's amazing actually. So Plus is meeting on September 3rd. They have an agenda, it's online. Oh, sorry, yeah, right. Plus is the preliminary land use service. So it's when all the state agencies come together and they look at developments and ordinances and other recommendations from the county or from companies trying to build. And they give their recommendations on each project or ordinance. Now, 99% of the time, nobody shows up to Plus. Well, the agencies show up to Plus, but nobody from the public comments at Plus. If you look at the September 3rd agenda for the Plus committee, or the committee, but the Plus group that's meeting, you'll see housing developments in Sussex County. I think there's actually only one that's not in Sussex County. All of them are on level 4. Some of them are in level 4 and out of play, which is the step beyond level 4. And so what I would like to do is give folks something to do. Go to the Plus meeting. You can provide a comment after each application or each ordinance that's on the agenda. It starts at 8:30. The first half is ordinance, and the second bit is housing developments. So it's held in Dover, but you can go online. You can testify virtually. So in our follow-up, we'll send out the recording from tonight for folks that couldn't make it out tonight. But we'll also include the link to the Plus meeting, where you can see, the sign-up register, so you can speak if you want to speak. You don't have to speak; you can just listen in. And they'll also have the address of if you want to go in person, then you can. But I think Jill said it earlier. You got to get involved, and you got to get involved early. Plus is one of the earlier stages in the development process, and so if you're looking for a place to get all of these agencies really thinking about your mindset and where you're at, that's Plus. So I'd encourage you to keep an eye on that and attend it if you can. I will just forewarn you that they're hearing an ordinance around data centers, which I'm from Newcastle, and that's what we're dealing with up there. So you'll hear a lot of us pontificate about data centers for a while, around 9:30. So maybe 10 o'clock would be a good time if you don't want to do that. But there is, I think, 4 or 5 developments coming up in this area, and they're all level 4.
Yeah.
I would say don't bother to go to Plus review in person. I did a couple of months ago on a project, which I used to do, and they used to meet in person and all the agencies were there and it was excellent. Plus
Wow.
review needs to come back to meeting in person, because then all the agencies have conversations with each other. Today, when I went to Plus review, I sat in a room with screens all around it, me and the person running the screen. And so I was talking to nobody.
Wow.
I made comments and I never heard back from Plus.
So virtual it is. So virtual it is. So you do have to register, to attend virtually, but it's in the link we'll send it out. And so you'll see the agenda, you'll see the link to register. So you can definitely do it, online. You don't have to drive all the way up to Dover, maybe not waste your time with yelling at screens, but
yell at your screen with other people's screens. So anyway, I just always like to close with giving folks something, an outlet, something to do. So I think, that's coming up soon. It's a very clear indicator of what Jill's talking about, and a way to just another way to make your voice heard. But thank you all very much, so much for coming out tonight, and really appreciate our panelists and all the work that they did and are doing and will continue to do. So thank you very much. And if you want a treat for the road, help yourself.
I think I've had enough of that. Yeah, no, more than, but I couldn't have dinner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Barbara and I, we wanted to.
That was fun?
It's fun.
Yeah.
Huh?
Don't want to have that. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Oh,
Cool little,
Yeah.
thanks.
I went to a conference up in New York at work, and
Good to leave you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sure they walk off every month.
so I got the whole thing.
I live indoors. I can't tell. When I see, the movie, I cringe. All those trees, and they didn't say that.
Right.
Why aren't they made to do that? Just.
There's nothing, that's the problem. There's nothing in place that stops them from doing it. There's nothing.
Why are they more concerned about saving something? Why are they concerned about land buildings?
I'll see you then. Okay, thanks, John. All right.
I don't know, I like the small town.
Yeah.
I don't like that happening. I don't like people here. Know this way. To know everybody.
Yeah. Oh.